How can we recognize stupidity in others and ourselves? The ancient Stoics believed that knowledge begins with realizing our own ignorance, as well as that of the people around us. 6 main indicators of ignorance will be discussed in this video through the lens of Stoic philosophy and human behavior. These teachings are aimed at helping us flourish, learn, and grow, not merely offering observations. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe for more ideas on wisdom and personal development. Number 1. The closed mind. The first indication that we are ignorant is when we have a closed mind. If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. Marcus Aurelius said in his Meditations, "I wish to change." This assertion is not merely a manifestation of intellectual modesty, rather, it is a rallying cry for anyone who hopes to acquire wisdom. The capacity to acknowledge one's own shortcomings and be open to new points of view is the foundation of personal development. A person with a closed mind, on the other hand, is obstinate in their adherence to their views and unwilling to acknowledge any facts or arguments that contradict them. The question, however, is, what causes a closed mentality to form in the first place? In its most fundamental form, it is founded on fear. You are afraid of being incorrect, afraid of being silly, and afraid of change. Our ideas are surrounded by a fortress constructed by our anxieties, which prevents anything that appears dangerous from entering. It is important to note that this fortress is not a symbol of strength. Rather, it is a prison. If we keep our minds closed, we will be cut off from the truth and forced to think in a limited and unchanging manner. We suffer more frequently in our imaginations than we do in the real world, as the Stoic philosopher Seneca famously stated. This holds true in this particular instance. The anxiety we experience when we are afraid of admitting that we are incorrect or changing our ideas is frequently much more intense in our minds than in reality. We are not merely defending our egos when we reject fresh ideas. Rather, we are denying ourselves opportunities to develop, learn, and improve. Consider this. How frequently do we observe individuals reaffirm their beliefs despite clear evidence that disproves them? Every time it happens, it is worth noting. Perhaps it's a co-worker who insists on using antiquated practices despite more effective options. Or it could be someone unwilling to revise their opinions because they believe doing so would make them appear weak. Here is the reality. Resisting change does not make you strong, it makes you frail. It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows, Epictetus reminds us. Individuals with closed mentalities are not only resistant to new information, but also blind to it. When we believe we already possess all the answers, we stop challenging ourselves with new questions. Additionally, when we stop asking questions, we stop evolving as individuals. Let's bring this closer to our own lives. Ask yourself, is there a belief or opinion you've maintained for an excessively long time? Perhaps it's a perspective you've never questioned or a concept inherited from your childhood. How recently have you allowed someone to challenge your thoughts without becoming defensive? When was the last time you did this? The answer to these questions is not easy, but it is necessary. Understanding our limitations is the first step toward wisdom. Here's an example. Imagine you're having a discussion with a friend, and they present evidence that contradicts your viewpoint. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Do you intend to listen and consider their perspective, or do you immediately defend your position? If it's the latter, you might be letting your ego hinder your growth. Keep in mind that error is not a sign of failure. It is an opportunity to gain knowledge. We learn from Marcus Aurelius that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You can control how you react to someone challenging your beliefs, but you cannot control whether or not they challenge them. A wise person sees challenges as opportunities to learn and grow. They are perceived as threats only by the unwise. In light of this, what steps can we take to free our minds? Start small. Seek out people with viewpoints different from your own. Read books, listen to podcasts, or watch videos that challenge your preconceived notions. Develop the skill of listening without judgment to new information presented by others. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? Most importantly, do not fear change. Growth depends on it. According to Marcus Aurelius, what stands in the way becomes the way. The very thing you try to avoid, recognizing you are wrong, could be the key to your next level of insight. To conclude, having a closed mind is not a permanent state. It is a habit, and habits can be changed. As you make the conscious decision to be curious rather than defensive, to let go of fear and embrace learning, you take one step closer to freedom. Have a conversation with yourself today. Ask, what belief am I holding on to that no longer serves me? What is the smallest step I can take to open my mind? The pursuit of wisdom begins with one straightforward decision: to let go of certainty and embrace uncertainty. Number 2, blaming others. The incapacity to accept responsibility is the second in a series of signs. Letters written by Seneca include the following: a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Yet the ignorant person does not recognize difficulties as chances for personal development. To avoid taking responsibility for their actions, they instead point the finger at others. Think about it. If every failure is other people's fault, how can you ever grow as a person? The beginning of wisdom is when we confront our shortcomings head-on and announce, "This is on me, and I will learn from it." Do you remember a time when you blamed other people for something you could have owned? Take a moment to reflect. If this is the case, allow that moment to serve as a lesson. One of the most obvious indications of folly is the practice of blaming others. This is because it gives the impression of innocence while simultaneously impeding one's own growth. A person deprives themselves of the opportunity to grow as a result of their own past errors when they persistently place blame on other people. Take a more in-depth look at this, shall we? Adversity is not something to be avoided. Rather, it is something that should be welcomed with open arms. As Seneca demonstrates through his metaphor regarding friction and perfection, whether it be a failure, a dispute, or a setback, every challenge we encounter is an opportunity to improve ourselves. The ignorant person, on the other hand, views these times not as mirrors for self-reflection, but as platforms for denial. They blame their surroundings, their co-workers, their upbringing, or even luck. Epictetus stated, "We are not disturbed by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens." He cautioned against this approach to thinking. To put it another way, it is not the external incident that defines us, but rather the way we choose to think about and react to it. A method of evading this duty is to place blame on others. It is not simple to confess that we are at fault, but confronting challenging realities about ourselves is a necessary part of accepting responsibility. Saying, "I made a mistake," or "I could have handled that better," is what it means to admit mistakes. However, here is the reality. Progress cannot occur in the absence of this genuineness. Think about the people who motivate you to do better. Are they the ones who blame others and play the victim? Or are they the ones who take responsibility for their choices, grow from their mistakes, and view obstacles as opportunities for growth and development? This is not only about major setbacks. We tend to divert rather than reflect on even simple, ordinary experiences. If you missed a deadline at work, you might have blamed your supervisor for not providing you enough time to complete the task. Perhaps you believe the other person is solely to blame for the failure of a relationship. You may find that these narratives provide a sense of solace in the short term, but in the long term, they will keep you stuck. Marcus Aurelius offered the following quote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Owning up to your errors does not make you weak. When you take charge of your own development, it is a sign of strength. The question now is, how can we break the habit of blaming others? First, anytime something goes wrong, take a moment to pause and reflect. Asking, "What could I have done differently?" is a better question than, "Who is to blame for this?" This shift in mentality changes everything. I challenge you to go back in time and think about a situation when you blamed someone else for what happened. Ask yourself, which aspect of that circumstance am I able to take responsibility for? I promise it will be empowering, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Every time you make the decision to accept responsibility, you are reclaiming your power. According to Seneca, adversity is what molds us. If you find yourself in a similar situation again, fight the impulse to point fingers. Instead, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? By looking within rather than outside, you can quit being a fool. This is the path to knowledge. Number 3, overconfidence without merit. The next topic is inflated self-assurance that lacks merit. The teachings of Epictetus include the following. It is not what happens to you that matters. What matters is how you react to it. People who are considered to be foolish frequently respond to the world with unwarranted assurance, mistaking their loud opinions for profound knowledge. This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect comes into play. People who have a limited amount of information often have the attitude that they know everything. It exemplifies complete and utter folly. On the other hand, wisdom is accompanied by humility, which is the realization that the more we learn, the more we become aware of how much we do not know. Let's continue to dissect this in greater detail. Overconfidence that is not supported by evidence is not merely a small flaw. Rather, it is an obstacle to both progress and comprehension. A person who is certain they know everything stops asking questions, stops listening, and stops learning. When they reach that point, to add insult to injury, they are completely unaware of the situation. One of the most famous quotes attributed to Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, is, "The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing." This is not about being self-deprecating or pretending to be more modest than you actually are. Rather, it is about acknowledging the magnitude of what is still unknown. Those who are foolish completely overlook this. In their limited knowledge, they mistake it for mastery. And in their opinions, they mistake facts for opinions. Consider the Dunning-Kruger effect, a psychological phenomenon that exemplifies this point in a way that is absolutely perfect. Individuals who have a poor level of aptitude or expertise in a certain field tend to exaggerate their level of competence. This is a cognitive bias. To put it another way, they do not have sufficient knowledge to comprehend the extent of their ignorance. In the meantime, those who are truly informed are frequently the most humble. They have experienced the expanse of the unknown during their lives. Are you familiar with the experience of having a conversation with someone who confidently spreads false information? They are not going to take into account different points of view. They are not going to listen to reason, and they are not going to admit the idea that they could be wrong. Don't you find it frustrating? Now that we have that out of the way, let's look inward. Are there aspects of your life in which you have been overconfident without any basis in reality? If anybody informs you that a certain individual speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said about you. Rather answer, "He was uninformed of my other shortcomings. Otherwise, he would not have mentioned only these." Epictetus reminds us of this advice. This is not merely a witty remark. Rather, it serves as a constant reminder to approach life with humility and self-awareness. It is not necessary for the smart person to appear faultless, since they are too concentrated on bettering themselves. The danger of having an excessive amount of confidence is that it can cause us to become blind. When we are overconfident in our own expertise, we prevent ourselves from being exposed to new and improved ideas, deepening our understanding and experiencing genuine progress. You might feel like you're standing on a wobbly pedestal for a brief period of time, but all it takes is one push of reality to bring you crashing down. So, what is the answer? The first thing to do is to be humble. Make the presumption that there is always more to learn and move forward from there. For example, rather than stating, "I know," you could try saying, "I'm learning." Questioning oneself is the second phase in the process. You should take a moment to pause and question yourself. Could I be wrong? When you are totally confident about something, ask, which pieces of evidence am I lacking? Or, what would someone who holds a different viewpoint say? In conclusion, you should surround yourself with people who push you to your limits. Those who are wise do not dislike being chastised. Rather, they look forward to it. Marcus Aurelius once offered the following advice. You must not only correct yourself, but you must also allow yourself to be corrected by others. As you go through life, make this a guiding concept for yourself. You are going to be asked to consider a subject or field in which you have great self-assurance. At this point, you should question yourself. Is that self-assurance supported by profound knowledge and comprehension, or are there potential gaps that you haven't taken into consideration? Rather than tearing yourself down, the objective is to construct a more solid foundation by locating and filling in the holes that have been identified. Keep in mind that wisdom stems from the absence of certainty. In the short term, having an excessive amount of self-assurance may make you feel safe, but in the long run, having humility will serve you better. If you find yourself speaking with complete and utter certainty in the future, take a moment to pause. Think about it. Be sure to question yourself. Am I being intelligent or am I just being loud? This is the way to liberate yourself from the pedestal of folly and begin the process of constructing genuine knowledge. Number 4. Ignoring consequences. The fourth point is to live without any consideration for the repercussions. What we do now echoes in eternity, Marcus Aurelius remarked somewhere in his writings. The individual who is foolish, on the other hand, does not consider beyond the present instant. They behave in a rash manner, oblivious to the potential consequences that their choices may have in the future. Take some time to reflect on the decisions you've made this week. Have you not taken into account the long-term effects? Would you say that you acted solely on impulse? A person who is smart is aware that every action has consequences and acts in accordance with this understanding. Shall we delve even farther into this? Marcus Aurelius wasn't merely a poet when he remarked, "What we do now echoes in eternity." He was referring to something significant. It was a timeless reality that he was pointing out. The future is shaped not just by our acts, no matter how huge or tiny they may be, but also by the actions of people around us. Someone who is dumb conducts their life as if this is not the case. They make judgments based on the need for short-term enjoyment or convenience and do not take into account the potential consequences that may follow. Overspending, neglecting relationships, or making decisions out of anger are all examples of behaviors that frequently result in regret when the consequences of those behaviors are brought to light. According to a quote attributed to Seneca, a Stoic philosopher, "It is not that we have a short time to live, rather it is that we waste a great deal of it." Foolishness is the pursuit of transient pleasures or the path of least resistance, both of which are ways in which time and potential are wasted. On the other side, wisdom is about developing a perspective that is long-term. The question that needs to be asked is, what kind of person will I become as a result of this decision? And how will this decision impact the rest of my life? Please pause for a moment to think. Are you someone who has ever made a choice without taking into account the long-term effects of that choice, only to come to regret it later? It could have been a decision regarding your finances, a change in your work, or even something as simple as a heated dispute in which you said things that you did not intend to say. This is not a punishment, but rather a learning experience. The significance of foresight is brought to mind by these reminders. One of the most common causes of foolishness is living on autopilot. Instead of pausing to consider the consequences of our actions, we choose to act on impulse, propelled by our feelings or our immediate desires. However, attentiveness is necessary for wisdom. It requires us to pause before we take action and question ourselves. What will happen next? What is the likelihood that this activity will get me closer to the person I want to become, or will it draw me further away from that person? First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do, Epictetus advised. Do what you have to do. People who are wise have a blueprint for their lives, and they make sure that their behaviors are in line with that blueprint. They are conscious of the fact that every choice, regardless of how insignificant it may seem, either strengthens or weakens their character. Take, for instance, the scenario in which you are tempted to skip a workout, overspend on something that you do not require, or lash out and express your dissatisfaction. It is possible that these decisions appear to be inconsequential at the moment, yet they have a cumulative impact. Putting off your workout for the day is the beginning of a pattern of disregarding your health. Costs that are not necessary build up to a stressful financial situation. Trust in your relationships might be damaged when you have an angry outburst. Having said that, this does not imply that you should overthink each and every choice you make, or that you should always be afraid of making errors. To be wise is not to achieve perfection. Rather, it is to have aim. In other words, it is about acknowledging that your actions are significant and accepting responsibility for them. A workout that you could do is as follows. Take a moment to pause for a few seconds and ask yourself 2 questions before making any decision, no matter how big or how small. What are the potential repercussions of this action? The first question to ask is, am I okay with those consequences? The second question is, am I okay with those consequences? Changing this one basic habit can completely alter the way you make decisions. When you find yourself on the verge of acting rashly, it is important to keep in mind the words of Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not over events that occur outside of you. Recognize this, and you will discover the strength you need. It is within your ability to make intelligent decisions, to plan ahead, and to live your life with purpose. Here is a question for you. What decisions are you making right now that will have an impact on your future? Is the life you wish to create compatible with the choices you make? Don't wait for regret to teach you the lesson. If you haven't already done so, now is the time to begin acting with intention and allow knowledge to direct your actions moving ahead. Number 5. Spreading negativity. Distributing negativity is the 5th item on the list. Associate with people who are likely to enhance you, Seneca told his followers. On the other hand, stupid people act in the opposite way. They constantly whine, gossip, and criticize others, which wears down their energy levels. Not only does negativity cause harm to those around you, but it also erodes your own values and principles. Through the cultivation of inner tranquility and the dissemination of that peace to the world, the Stoics believed, Whenever you find yourself in the midst of negativity, you should ask yourself, how can I bring positivity instead? What are some ways that you can alter your thinking if you are the one causing it? A sickness is similar to negativity. It begins with a simple thing such as a critical comment here or a complaint there, but it quickly spreads, infecting not just those in your immediate environment, but also yourself. The piece of advice that Seneca gives, which is to associate with people who are likely to improve you, is not limited to selecting companions who are positive. Additionally, it serves as a reminder to be someone who other people would like to associate with. When someone is dumb, they frequently thrive on negativity, using it as a means to form relationships with other people or to conceal their own inadequacies. Complaints, gossip, and criticism may provide a sense of temporary satisfaction, but they rarely result in the resolution of issues. Instead, they foster an environment that is riddled with mistrust and dissatisfaction. Negativity, on the other hand, is a habit, and just like any other habit, it is one that can be broken. When it comes to our reactions and attitudes, the Stoics thought that we have influence over them. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, Marcus Aurelius, a Roman philosopher, wrote. It is inevitable that your life will mirror the gloomy and critical ideas that you have. You will be able to create a more tranquil and fulfilling life for yourself and the people around you if you think in a constructive and positive manner toward your thoughts in the first place. Let's investigate the reasons why people disseminate negativity. Most of the time, it is the result of internal conflicts that have not been resolved. It is possible that a person who chronically criticizes others is projecting their own fears onto them. It's also possible that someone who engages in gossiping is looking for validation or a distraction from their own experiences. Having this awareness does not mean pointing fingers. Rather, it means having the awareness that negativity is frequently a symptom of a more profound level of misery. If you feel that you are stuck in a cycle of negativity, what exactly can you do to break out of it? Practice awareness as your first step. Keep your words and thoughts in mind at all times. To what extent do they contribute to the process? It is important to question yourself. Is this complaint helping me find a solution, or is it just fueling the problem? Whenever you find yourself whining the phrase, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters," is a poignant lesson that Epictetus provides. Our attitude is the determining factor in whether or not the obstacles we face in life make us more bitter or more better. Focus on what you can do to put things right, rather than concentrating on what is wrong with the situation. You should also avoid allowing the negativity that you are surrounded by from other people to consume you. Withdraw into yourself as far as you can. Seneca tells his followers that protecting your inner peace is what this means, not isolating yourself from the world. Even if other people are engaging in gossip or criticism, you do not have to do the same thing. It is possible for you to establish boundaries, redirect conversations in a positive direction, or just remove yourself from surroundings that are toxic. The next time you feel the temptation to criticize or complain, take a moment to pause and think about what you will do instead. Instead of concentrating on the issue at hand, take a few deep breaths and try to think of something constructive to say or do. The act of expressing thanks, suggesting a solution, or shifting the conversation to something that is uplifting could be considered quite straightforward. Practicing mindfulness, even for a short period of time, can completely transform your viewpoint. Keep in mind that the effects of the energy you send into the world are like ripples. When you distribute negativity, it will sometimes return back to you in a magnified form. If, on the other hand, you promote positivity, you will establish an environment of kindness and support that will be to everyone's benefit, including your own. We are reminded by Marcus Aurelius that the happiness of your life is dependent upon the quality of your thoughts. Question yourself, what kinds of thoughts are you cultivating in your mind? What kind of energy are you disseminating to the general public? Please use this as a guide. Instead of being the storm that makes the sky darker, you should be the storm that makes the air clean. Number 6. Lack of empathy. Lastly, a lack of empathy for the situation. Epictetus tells us that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, which allows us to listen twice as often as we speak, so that we can maximize our listening abilities. People who are irresponsible lack this equilibrium, due to the fact that they have difficulty seeing beyond their own needs. They are unable to comprehend the experiences and emotions of others. It is not just a moral virtue, but also a proof of intelligence to have empathy for other people. In a world that is full of chaos, it enables us to navigate relationships, find solutions to problems, and find peace. Due to the absence of it, we find ourselves alone within our own ignorance. Empathy is the foundation of both wisdom and connection. The absence of it leads to the disintegration of relationships, the weakening of communities, and the narrowing of individuals' viewpoints. It is a fantastic illustration of the significance of tuning into other people that Epictetus's advice, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth to listen more than we speak," is still relevant today. On the other hand, ignorant people invert this ratio, giving consideration to their own voice while disregarding the viewpoints of those around them. What is the significance of a lack of empathy in terms of foolishness? Mostly due to the fact that it demonstrates a lack of comprehension of one of the most fundamental realities of life, which is that we are all interconnected. What injures the hive injures the bee, Marcus Aurelius stated in his book Meditations. When we disrespect the emotions or needs of other people, we are eventually causing injury to ourselves. Consider the situation. Have there ever been a disagreement between you and another individual in which the other person refused to take into consideration your point of view? That was how it felt, right? There is a good chance that it left you feeling dissatisfied, unheard, and alienated. Let's now consider the frequency with which you can unwittingly cause the same harm to other people. Being compassionate is only one aspect of empathy. It also involves one's ability to reason, the ability to put ourselves in the position of another person and view the world through their eyes is made possible by this. In light of this, it is not necessary for you to compromise your own boundaries or agree with everyone. It involves having an understanding of where they are coming from, even if you do not personally agree with their viewpoints. Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness, Seneca reminds us throughout his writings. The capacity for empathy presents an opportunity not only to connect with other people, but also to develop as individuals. Not only does it teach us patience and humility, but it also teaches us to look beyond our immediate needs. However, dumb people are resistant to empathy since it demands work on their part. Ignoring the suffering of another person is far simpler than confronting it head-on. In order to have a better understanding, it is more convenient to think that someone has malicious motives. On the other hand, wisdom necessitates the bravery to care, whereas foolishness flourishes in this kind of self-centered simplicity. In a world that frequently appears to be divided, what are some ways that we might foster empathy? Beginning with active listening is a good place to start. If someone is speaking to you, you should not simply wait for your turn to react. Instead, you should listen to what they have to say. It is important to pay attention to their tone, the words they use, and the feelings that they may be experiencing beneath the surface. Try to put yourself in the shoes of someone else and try to imagine the challenges they face. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, "The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." This is the advice that Marcus Aurelius advocates because they are unable to differentiate between good and evil. They behave in this manner. A reminder to engage other people with compassion, acknowledging that their behaviors are frequently the result of ignorance or pain rather than malicious intent. Even though this may sound harsh, at last, take some time to think about your personal experiences. What are some instances in which you have been misunderstood or ignored? That was how it felt, right? Utilize your recollections as a guide to ensure that you treat other people with the same level of understanding that you wish you had received. Empathy has the power to influence not only our interpersonal connections, but also our internal life. Life becomes more fulfilling and significant when we shift our perspective from viewing people as challenges or opponents to viewing them as fellow travelers on this journey. Epictetus encourages us to put this into practice on a daily basis for the following reason. Don't just say you have read books. Show that through them you have learned to think differently, to become a better person. Embrace empathy as the evidence of your personal development. Ask yourself, do I focus more on listening than I do on speaking? Am I quick to pass judgment on others, or do I make an effort to understand them? In addition to revealing your conduct, the responses to these questions also indicate who you are as a person. It is not a sign of weakness, but rather of strength, to have empathy. It is the capacity to connect with others, to heal, and to construct bridges in a world that is in dire need of these. In the present moment, the beginning of wisdom is when we realize that the hardships of others are not distinct from our own. Allow this to serve as a reminder to you. The 6 signs of stupidity, as seen through the lens of Stoic philosophy, are all presented here for your perusal. Remember that this is not about categorizing other people. Rather, it is about being conscious of yourself. A quote attributed to Marcus Aurelius states, "Do not waste any more time arguing about what a good man ought to be. Act as one." The purpose of these indications should be to serve as a mirror for introspection rather than a weapon for judgment. You should also consider sharing this video with someone who could benefit from a little bit of wisdom in their life. If you found it to be useful in beginning our journey toward growth and comprehension, click the subscribe button because this is just the beginning of our adventure. I will see you in the following video.